Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so excited today to be joined by Alexander Dreymon to talk all about Netflix's The Last Kingdom in its final season. And the first thing that I actually wanted to talk about is the work that you did, kind of going back to the beginning with Penny Dyer, who was the dialect coach that you worked with on this series, because the two of you kind of came up with this accent for Uhtred, which has this real mix of kind of like British and Scandinavian tones. And because it's an accent that the two of you kind of landed on that really represented character versus it being something where you could really look to other material and kind of listen to a lot of it. I was interested in how you really found a lot of the inflections to adopt it, especially when you're working with television scripts and having to move so quickly with so much dialogue, because there's also such a musicality and a rhythm to the dialogue as well.
Absolutely. And I think the thing that you just mentioned is the key to it. There's like a musicality and a rhythm to Uhtred's accent that makes up so much more of it than just how you pronounce certain words. He was born a Saxon, but was raised by Danes, and we wanted him to have an accent that really stood out from everybody else. So the show took great care in casting Scandinavian actors for all the Danes, and then British actors for all the Saxons. And so we wanted Uhtred to be something, that didn't fit into either of those camps, because that's his story. And so we kind of started with a British base, and then made certain choices about how we pronounce the Z's as S's, and went a little bit harder on the T's. And I had a lot of help from Penny Dyer. I'm so glad you mentioned her, because she's been working with us for the whole 5 seasons. And then the musicality just sort of came organically. I think that just made sense out of the writing and who this character was, and it became what it is now. It kind of grew on its own.
Yeah. And you also talk a lot about how whenever you're developing a character that you really like to kind of inhabit them and take them out into the world, and obviously you can't take a full Viking out into the world, but there's aspects of his personality and kind of ways that you can play around with it. And so when you were developing the character of Uhtred, what are the aspects of him that you kind of tested out with people that you knew, or just walking into new situations and trying to respond to them as character?
Yeah, that was really fun at the beginning. So when we started shooting the show, my hair was a little bit longer than it is right now, but we obviously wanted Uhtred to have this, sort of wild look to him. So I got hair extensions, and very often women get hair extensions just around this part of their head, but I got the whole head. I went in the morning and came out about 8-9 hours later, and I looked like a caveman. And to have that wild hair suddenly, already gave me a lot just of how it felt to have that, because it's like an alien body on your head, but it also changes your look so dramatically. And I just mentioned that because I really noticed how people looked at me differently with that type of hair, and they were a little bit more careful, and depending also on how you wear yourself. Like, for example, I had these scars that I got in makeup tests, and then I just would keep them on and walk around the city with them and interact with people, and the reactions you got were very different. And I think one of the things that I always liked about Uhtred was that he was really mischievous, and I would just go out and play tricks on people and mess with them. And there's one story that Harry McIntyre always makes fun of me for, because I've told it before. There was this couple who was sitting on a bench, and it was very romantic, and I would just come and sit right in between them, and just hang out, and it was so awkward. And there's this kind of joy that comes with that, and that comes with putting yourself in strange situations, and I think there's a liberty that comes with being in character, because as Alexander, I would never do such a thing, because I think, I'd be too worried to upset somebody, or, too embarrassed. But I think when you're playing a character, that gives you a lot of liberty. And I think Uhtred has that I don't care thing about him that really helped me at the beginning to get into the skin of who I was playing.
Yeah. I love that
That's
you're
fun.
bringing up his very kind of like mischievous sense of humor, because that's one of the great aspects of him as a character. And even just thinking back to one of the moments in the last season where, Ethelfled shows him kind of that secret garden and he's like, you mean we could have just been coming here the whole time and sneaking off together?
Yeah, those
you know,
little moments were really important to me because the story just becomes so
mhm.
dire at points. He goes through so many heartaches and terrible situations, and there came a time when I found it really difficult to still find these little bits of humor in there because it's hard to place considering the circumstances. So, I'm very happy that little bits like that still made it through.
I mean, since it kind of got harder and harder to place with everything that he's going through, and that's really what stops it from feeling so claustrophobic with everything that he's going through as well. How would you kind of, obviously there's a moment like that where it's in the dialogue and it's very obvious that that's a great comedic moment, but there's other moments where you just kind of bring it through with certain looks and glances. And so how would you work to really find those moments?
Well, I gotta say a lot of that. I got a lot of help from Mark Rowley and Arnis Federa, which was, he's gonna kill me. I never know how to pronounce his name properly, but who plays Citric, and Mark who plays Finnan, and those guys are just the best. They always come up with insane ideas and improvisations, and they're so creative. Um, and so I think playing off of them always helped me a lot to find these little moments of levity.
Mhm. One of the other behind the scenes collaborations that I wanted to ask you about is that with Levante Lesak, who's the stunt coordinator and also horse whisperer, as you've deemed him as well.
Yeah.
Because in working with horses in stunt work, it's such an interesting dichotomy because there's a lot of moments where you're kind of going off into these battle scenes or having these very raw emotions, but obviously you're also riding a horse at the same time, and so you have to have that connection with the animal. You have to kind of still be controlling the animal and kind of give them a stillness of energy so that they're not going to be responding to the other aspect of what you're putting out in your performance. And I'm so fascinated with how you would work to find those two different energies, one for your performance and one to be able to kind of have that kinship with the animal that you're working with at the same time.
Yeah, that was such a learning curve. And you're so right about what you're saying. It's very important when you're on the horse that the horse still feels that you're in control. And that also means that you're in control of your emotions. But as you said, sometimes the scene requires you to just go right up until the edge and push yourself. And at the beginning we had some close calls where there was this at the end of the first episode when Uhtred rides up to the fortress and holds out the severed head to his uncle and yells, "Bevenber is mine." And the horse really felt that I was in a lot of turmoil and wanted to jump off that bridge, and there were spikes underneath the bridge. It was scary, but I think those are things that I that's something that I think I'm always going to take with me to you kind of have to operate on two levels, and I think that also is something that helps with directing, where you have to have two brains as an actor. I think to some extent you need to know what's going on, and then you need to be able to be in your character and just let loose. And I think the other thing that I love about working with horses is that the more alive and in the moment you are, the more interesting you are in front of the camera. And because the horse requires you to have a constant back and forth, you kind of get that for free. You're always communicating. You always have to impose the limits, because the horse is always searching for the limits and trying to push them and see if you're still the boss or if you've just, checked out, and it can do whatever it wants. So I'm so sorry. I think I lost my thread there a little bit, but did that answer your question?
It did. And you're bringing up that idea as well of just needing to be really alive and really present in the moment. And obviously so much of performing with your castmates is like that as well, with the listening that you're doing. And in the gift of working on a show for so long, there's that opportunity to really go into a scene and go into a moment and kind of access vulnerability more easily, because you have a sense already of what the other person is going to bring to the table, but you're also still working with new cast members at the same time as well, even in the final season. And so when you have a moment where you're working with someone new for the first time, do you find that there's more of kind of a focus for yourself on what you're bringing, as opposed to kind of sitting and looking at what the other person's going to bring to the table, because you don't know yet in that moment.
I think in whatever you do, it's so important to invest into the relationships with the people that you're working with, just on a basic human level, first of all. But then also in terms of the work you can produce, I think if you first make sure that you establish a relationship with the person you're going to be working with, and try to get it to a level where you can start trusting each other, you can go so much further. And the most beautiful thing about this show was how much of a community we were, and how much of a family we still are. We are all very close and very very loving and respectful of each other's work. And I think I would hope that anybody who came in, even if it was just for a day, that they would have felt that and kind of felt included in that. And I don't really remember any moment where it felt like there was any contentious energy going on with another actor. So that little bit of magic that you're talking about was kind of there from the start with most of the people that we worked with.
That's really amazing to hear. And jumping into some of the characteristics and traits of Uhtred, one of the things that's really lovely to see in him as a character is that even in the face of victory, kind of even in those moments in the final episode, he still always has a respect about him and a humility about him. And I think that's something that you always played to and always really honored in him as a character. And again, it's going back to that idea of the different energy shifts that you have to create within him as a character. You have to be able to show everything that he needs to pull on within himself, the confidence that he has to go into battle with. And then in the moments in between, you also get to really play to that humility and respect that he has, even for his adversaries. And so I was interested in how you always worked to play to those different sides and make sure that it always came back to that very grounded place.
Yeah, I think Uhtred really stands for a certain set of values, which, I adhere to pretty much all of them. As long as they're adjusted to the time that we're living in now. And I think a lot of that also came from our stunt coordinator, Levente Lejac, who you mentioned before. He has that incredible humility about him naturally, and he does all this incredible work with his horses, and the stunts are really quite major. The responsibility that he has is very impressive, because you literally have armies going at each other, and everything that comes with that, the risk of injury, etc., and the precision that you need to have. But at the same time, you need to get that violence in there and make it believable. And so he's a person who is totally on top of all of that, and at the same time has an incredible humility and an incredible kindness and softness about him. And I think he was definitely an inspiration for the warrior in Uhtred, and for those different levels of energy and how you can summon that. And he very often was a sounding board for me in terms of how much to let loose and how much to hold back, and how much violence to give out, and how much vulnerability to bring into it. And as you say, it's quite tricky sometimes to adjust those different things and jump back and forth within a fight or a battle. But yeah, he was a huge help in that respect.
Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about your jump into directing in this season as well with episode 2, because it also feels like that was such a great moment to get to direct. You have Uhtred's love interest finding out, that she's passing. And so you get to also, work with cast members on really pivotal scenes in the episode. And I know it's something that you'd been wanting to do for a long time, but obviously being the lead of the show, you're working every minute of every day. You're working during your days off and shooting. And so what was that process of working with the producers, who I know were incredibly supportive of this, to really kind of finesse and figure out how to make it work, even just schedule wise, and the way that you would be both preparing character wise for performances, and then also, sitting there and storyboarding or going through character beats or looking at casting for supporting roles and all of those elements, even going into post-production on the episode?
Well, as you mentioned, I'm incredibly grateful to the producers, first of all, to give me a shot at it and trusting me with it, and to the whole the whole cast and crew have been so wonderful in terms of making sure that I had the tools that I need in order to produce the best work that we all could give. And so first of all, working with a set of incredible actors makes such a huge difference, because you can go so much further. Millie, who you mentioned, her performance was just absolutely stellar, and continued to be so. And it was such a privilege to direct her in those scenes. And in terms of the schedule, I mean, that is, luckily that's not my responsibility. I kind of get the slots where I know, okay, now I have time to do this, now I have time to do that. And, during that time, I just knew that I was going to have zero time to myself, and that was it. And I adored it. It was wonderful. There were times when I would be doing, after I finished directing, we were in the edit, and I would be in front of the camera, and then they would call cut, and I would run to my computer, which was propped up on some medieval bench or table or part of a house, and give editing notes and correspond with my editor, and then run back in front of the camera. And we kind of just made it work. It was definitely tough to juggle, but it was great. And you also get off on that adrenaline, I think, of just having to get it done. It is a show that has an incredibly tight schedule, so that was a challenge from the start to finish, especially while we were shooting. You just have so much that you need to get done. And I think once you start, you're just riding that wave, and you just don't stop until you got it. I had a wonderful mentoring from the director who directed episode 1 and 3, Andy Hay, who gave me a lot of excellent advice, and who was incredibly supportive in the prep that we did. And for me, it's kind of all in the prep. I work as much as I possibly can before I get started, whether it's for acting or directing. And I think once you have a solid prep in place, then all of that becomes possible.
And looking back at aspects of your performance throughout the show, it's kind of remarkable to think about the number of times that you had to play to the idea of grief and loss in his life. And every single moment that you had to do that feels very personal and very different, and feels, you can really feel the different dynamic of what each particular loss means to him as a character, which is a really challenging thing to do, to be able to play to that same emotion, but always find different ways of doing so. And so how did you approach looking at each time that happened for him? Because even through the final season, that's still an occurrence, and losing someone like Brida is very different to, having his lover's head chopped off and thrown in his face as well, and so those are very different dynamics to have to find in your performance. And I was interested in that.
So wonderful to hear you say that you felt the difference and the nuances between all of these events. And I think the key is in what you just mentioned. It's to make it personal to yourself. And I saw that you interviewed Andrew Garfield not long ago, right? Or was that just his face up on the website?
Oh, it was just his. Yeah, I didn't interview him. I talked to the editors, but we did a live event with him.
Right. Well, he, I think, is just such a master at making it real for himself. Everything is so incredibly personalized, and I think that is, that is your job anyway as an actor, to make everything as true to yourself as you possibly can. But I think especially in events like that are quite, or can be quite, repetitive, I think that's really how you get it done. You have to make it as precise and as personal and intimate as you can. And so I'm very glad that that it worked.
Yeah. He's also going through a lot of moments in this final season of kind of reimagining his future, both for himself and for his family. You know, when his son is injured, it's, well, this is the life that I envisioned for him that he's not going to have now. What does that mean? You know, in losing the person that he loves the most, even though they weren't together, he's mourning, holding on to that hope of what that could have been. And then there's still always the aspect that's underlying for him of that journey towards finding a sense of home that he's been going through since childhood, really. You know, and how did you view his relationship with the idea that he always had for his future and the way that he has to constantly step back and recalibrate that within himself?
Well, I think that's just so relatable to everyone. You know, everybody makes plans and then realizes that that's not how the world works. And I think for me personally, because I grew up in so many different places, the idea of a home is very alive subject in my life. You know, what does a home mean, and which things in life represent a home? Is it a place, or is it people? Or and so you know, for Uhtred, I think that's one of the gifts that I got given with this character is to be able to play somebody who is so, you know, so real and struggles, even though he lives in the 9th/10th century. You know, he struggles with similar concepts than everybody does, you know, even today.
Absolutely. And talking a little bit about those final moments of that final episode as well, you know, again, it's such a great performance in that moment. And you were working really closely with John East on that. And I know that the two of you had some conversations where you sat down before filming it to kind of go over, okay, these are kind of the key moments that we're going to be flashing back to in the montage, because obviously those clips hadn't all been pulled and edited together at that point. And was that a really useful tool for you going into that scene? And was there also kind of a catharsis in filming that moment, because it's also the emotion for you with him as a character, with everything that he's been through for 5 seasons, and then for you personally at the same time, it's you coming to the end of filming a show and your relationship with a character that you've sat with for so long.
Yeah, I love that you know so much about the whole process. I'm so impressed. That moment was definitely cathartic, and also just, it was such a beautiful moment because John East and I have become really good friends, and he was the one who came up with the idea of even having that sequence in the first place, and he just talked me through all of these moments. You know, we of course we had a look at all the moments, so they were kind of fresh in my mind, but then he just talked me through it. And you know, once again, I got to go back to that feeling of trust that exists on that set. You know, it was a very vulnerable moment, and it's just so much easier to put yourself in that space and just be completely open and alive to that process of you know, I want to say osmosis, when you know that everybody around you is there to support you and lift you up. And so just hearing John East talk me through those moments, it was very, you know, very easy to kind of let myself go and really feel the emotions that are connected to all of these moments. And it felt wonderful, and I'll always be grateful to him for, you know, giving me that opportunity and being there for me when I went through it.
And you've also spoken a little bit about how the experience of working on this show and playing this character for so many seasons has also instilled a real confidence that you have in yourself as an actor at this point, because you've had to play, you know, every single part of the emotional range, so many different scenarios, so many different types of scenes, so many different tones, even within singular scenes at this point. And I wanted to ask about, what is that kind of difference in the confidence that you feel in yourself as a performer and as an actor from working on this show and playing this character for so long?
Well, I'm really excited to now build a new character, and I think that's where the next challenge is going to lie in my acting career. But then, as you say, in terms of the emotional spectrum, I think so much so much of being able to do your job as an actor has to do with confidence and trusting yourself. And having, you know, kind of done it all in that aspect, it just gives you so much assurance, and so it enables you to relax so much more, I think. So the next set I'll be going on, it's such a blessing to be able to come with all of that, you know, with all of that energy and weight, and, you know, baggage, knowing that I'll be fine. I think that's it's a huge luxury and privilege, and I really look forward to seeing how, you know, how these different emotions are going to come out of a different person. Yeah.
And in looking back on your time playing Uhtred, what is it that you're going to miss most about playing this character, or the experience of working on this show?
I'm a huge fan of shooting outdoors, and being, you know, part of the elements, and, you know, working with the horses, and you know, all of that is I think you just get so much for free when you work in that sort of environment. But I mean, obviously it's all the people that I've worked with over the years, and that I already miss terribly, you know, that I'm really gonna miss that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, huge congratulations on everything with this role and this character over the seasons, and excited that we still get that final installment of a follow-up film as well. And thank you so much for talking about all of this. Really appreciate your time, Alex.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm a big fan of your work, so I hope to get to talk to you again at some point.
Likewise.